was it?
Yeah.
It was with Don Sickler's monk thing. And there was we were making switching planes, and there's a big line and everything, and Ray Drummond was up at the front of the line, and I was at the back, and there was all these people between, and he sees me, says, "Hi, Jack." Boy, people start ducking down and everything.
That's great. That's funny. We were discussing before we started taping this the bipolar jazz community.
Yeah, right.
Now wait, I put this thing on airplane mode. It's not supposed to ring. Why is that? What happened to it? See, we were talking about, first of all, we were talking about technology and how Jack got this new printer that doesn't work.
I'm still trying to learn how to play the trumpet. I don't want to have to go to MIT to learn another thing to get a letter. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, I'm trying to to do this show, and I put airplane mode on. I guess you can't see that. And if it's green and it says airplane mode, isn't that that means it's on? That means the call is supposed to come through. But yet this call from RoboKiller of all things.
It's not going. Oh, it's coming through now?
Well, we just heard the phone ring. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
I guess we can't spend the whole time figuring out how it did happen.
I know. There's no.
But what happened? Wait. I turned the ringer off. Now I turn the ringer off. Yeah. Oh, the ringer's on, but they're receiving the call. Okay. Oh, we started, by the way, so we're cool.
So it's like people say, somebody said once that if you keep doing the same things over and over and expect a different result, that's insanity. Well, that's stupid. For one thing, when we practice our instruments, we sometimes do the same thing over and over, and we eventually get a different result. But now with the computers and all this stuff, I think that the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over and expecting to get the same result. Have you noticed you'll do stuff and it'll be completely different the second time you do it? There's a bit of free will in computers, believe it or not.
Well, that's what they say with all this AI.
Yeah.
Stuff, which a friend of mine keeps calling it Al because he can't read the small I from the large I.
Yeah. It could be I.
What is Al?
Just I is good enough.
Like a pirate. Next thing is
Yeah. So anyway,
we were discussing, how is bipolarity built into what we do? Because we're not like somebody who goes to a job every day.
I don't know. Everybody, they used to call it manic depressive. Everybody's a little bit bipolar. If you're not, then you're dead.
I think so too. But I think we're prone to it in a way because we can have lucrative periods where we're active and there's a lot going on. For apparently no reason.
Right.
Just a shallow period where you're scuffling to pay the rent.
Right. It was, what I've always also noticed, and I get this stuff I've talked to some psychiatrists and different people that are psychiatrists and psychologists about schizophrenia and bipolar thing is like, frankly, there's a choice involved. Oh no, they can't. Well, you didn't live with one. You know what I'm saying? They study out of books. They're like people that study music theory. They don't live with these people in real life. You know what I'm saying? And like, one thing, the first choice they make is to stop taking their medication.
Because it provides a kind of high when you
and then it's like, if I noticed, like schizophrenics, especially bipolars, I don't know, they just kind of go off or something. I don't know what it is, but the schizophrenics, I think, to avoid stress a lot. I've seen them, we know some schizophrenics. There's a trumpet player that's very into it. He uses it. I've cracked on him a couple times and said, I got you, because they're not stupid. People that have mental problems are not stupid people. The guy that checks out the butt plugs at the porn store probably doesn't have a lot on his mind. That's probably his goal.
Right. It is that. So, but I know the same trumpet player, but he says to me, they're just coming to hear the world's most famous schizophrenic. I
Yeah.
said, at least you're the world's most famous something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing I've called him out on it a couple times, when I see where he's going with it, because he's like, and when I noticed is like, and my first wife was bad schizophrenic. I mean, I never saw her get as bad as this trumpet player when we see him on the street sometimes. But he's not stupid. He's managed to keep together to keep a career going. And working 6 days a week and stuff. I mean,
and the marriage and a long marriage.
He's no idiot, right?
Yeah.
And like, but my first wife, she said when she was in Bellevue, she said those are some smart people in there. But I've noticed a schizophrenic, if something comes up and they don't want to deal with it, to fight stress, it seems like they will start kind of acting like running around in circles or making up some kind of stuff or talk about how they're losers or just something kind of crazy. But then problem is they fall in love with their act, because once you set off that thing, you're gonna go into it. It's just like, I mean, a perfectly sane person, if we sit around and say I'm a failure, I mean, we're gonna be a failure. We don't have to be crazy, but it's like we fall in love with our act. But schizophrenia and bipolarity is a lot of fantasies and stuff, especially schizophrenia,
Yeah, well, there's
So I think there's a choice in it, and living with schizophrenic for 13 years and a bipolar person for 22. I think I know a little bit about it. You know what I'm saying?
I remember having long, detailed discussions with a trumpet player, and he put it exactly like that. It was very funny. We were talking about it, and I was told he doesn't speak, and as soon as we met, he talked all night to me. But we've always had good rapport. And one time he said he thought it started out as an act. He said it just like that. He said it started out a way to keep the squares away.
Right.
So weird that like they got afraid.
I really believe that. You can't tell that to a psychologist or psychiatrist. So,
but then because he's a very funny guy too, he says he thought about it for a second, and he had like what a Jack Benny like look on his face, and he said, I wonder where I started to believe it myself.
But anyway, we meet those people in the music business. I think I met a few people. One guy that got me helped me get the gig with Mingus, and then got me fired. And
Really?
I think he was bipolar. You know what I mean? He would do that to a lot of people. He would help a lot of people get started, and once they were starting to get over, he would try to sabotage them,
That's a strange manifestation of it, but I've known people a little bit like that too. That they're, on one hand they're your buddy, and then somebody says, so and so said this about you, and I'm like, what?
I don't know. I mean, wonder if anybody's your buddy. I mean, I've had some big betrayals, like people I've known for decades. Is that part of the social media thing or I don't know what it is. It's all of a sudden you've outlived your usefulness. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah,
I don't know.
I know. I mean, lately I had a kind of betrayal with someone that I had become friends with recently, and that got me lamenting my friends that have passed away, because I would think to myself, well, Albert Daly never would have done that to me. You know what I mean? And I've known some very difficult people where, people that were described as hard to get along with or this and that, and yet somehow we were friends, which is sort of like what we were talking about. Guys like Freddie Hubbard was fond of you and he was fond of me, and he wasn't fond of everybody.
Yeah, I know. Freddie was, I guess, a lot to deal with sometimes, but I always got along with him. He even come to my gigs. He was in the audience once for one of my, was in Copenhagen for a live date. And then in New York, he came to one of my gigs, and he came and once he wanted me to take his band over from, like I said, anytime he saw me, he would ask me to sit in if I had my horn with me. He was always, I mean, how that started was there was a friend of mine, we used to be tight of one of the few trombone players I can stand. He's a valve trombone player named Jules Rowell, and he's got a few things in the bats flying in the belfry too. But anyway, uh, it was in 1967, Summer of Love, the first time we took acid, and there was one of these times when you look at a brick building and things are spinning, you know. And so it was a Sunday afternoon, and I had matinee at the Jazz Workshop. So I said, "Hey, let's go sit in with Freddie Hubbard." so, so we went and sat in with Freddie Hubbard that day, And ever since then, Freddie was always good to me. And I told him later, I was Shelley's manhole. Yeah, we were on acid. I thought something was happening.
Yeah, right. That's funny. I met Freddie. Well, I had met him one time when I was a kid. I used to go to this after-hours session in 1969, Amo Music Studio, which everybody was up there. I was 17, and it was like all the pictures on my wall and all my record covers suddenly came to life, like an Alice in Wonderland type of fantasy. Because there was, like Cedar Walton and Barry Harris and everybody in the same place. Wynton Kelly took me under his wing at that point, and I got to know him and Kenny Dorham, and through Evelyn Blakey, who was the house singer. But anyway, Freddie came in one night, and I had my back turned, and I was facing Wynton at the piano. And I just had happened to do that. I was like in a 3/4 stance or something, and the place opened at like 4 in the morning. I would often go till noon. Like on Friday night, Saturday, we get out there at noon. So somebody's going, "Yeah, Jackie back. Jackie, man, it's been a while." And I didn't even know I sounded like Jackie McLean because I was into Bird and Sonny Rollins at the time, and I'd listened to some Jackie. I had one record, The Connection, with Freddie Red that I played to death. I played that record all the time. So I guess it came through. And I turned around and said, "Jackie McLean?" And I said, "No, So he said, "Hey, I'm playing tomorrow night at this place called Mother Blues up in the Bronx." It was 240-something Street. And took the train. He said, "Come up and sit in with me." So I had been jamming down at a place called Pee Wee's in the East Village, and I took the train up with my friend Richard Clay, and we got up there, and it was the summer of love. Well, I don't know, 69 was not the summer of love, but it was that period. And I had long hair, and wore the same sweatshirt all week.
Yeah.
And Roy Eldridge had not given me the talk yet. Well, actually, he did give me the talk the year before, but I wasn't taking it seriously, I guess, about how you should dress well on the bandstand because most black mothers only have the chance to see their sons in suits on 3 occasions.
I just always had you to dress a little bit better than the audience. The suits thing got on my nerves after a while. It's like, here's a guy wearing $1,000 suit. And he's singing about the dog ran off and the cat died and grandma's promoting cockfights in an empty lot and I got lung cancer and he's wearing $1,000 suit singing the blues, right?
Well, you remember Robert Klein's white upper middle class blues?
Robert Klein?
Yeah. I woke up this afternoon. Both the cars were gone. I took my martini and threw it across the lawn.
Yeah, sounds right.
It sounds right. Yeah. But anyway, Roy did tell me this thing of that you should, because
I think you should look better. I was always, to tell you the truth, some of it looks silly now because it was the fashion of the times, but I was always the best dressed guy on Mingus's bands, I thought. But Danny Richmond,
you were a sharp dresser, I recall. Not sharp, but
Mingus or Danny would try to be, but he was wearing this flat. He was wearing a lot of his wife's clothes, to tell you the truth, And Mingus, of course, wore the same shit every day. Ricky Ford was in his blue jeans, and
well, Bobby Nellums was on the band at that time.
Yeah, Bob was on. He always wore his post jacket or something, But it's nobody kind of dressed a little different than the crowd. You know what I'm saying? You got to dress a little different than the crowd.
Well, the way Roy put it to me, because the long story was that a black man's mother could only see him in church, in a coffin, or on the bandstand.
Yeah,
So that's why they dress sharp. That's what Roy.
Well, now they think some of the clubs even now. This is I don't like this. We went. I played over the Mingus big man. I hate that. It's not nothing Mingus about it. But anyway, we played it at in Tokyo at the Blue Note Club, and they tell the musicians must wear suits, and Lincoln Center Club they must wear a suit and tie. Look, we're in fucking show business, man. Hello, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, Miles Davis, I've ever made fun of him, but he was Miles Davis to the end. He was Miles Davis when he was wearing pinstripes and stuff. That was, got a lot of attention at the time, I mean, this is show business, why do we got to look like a bunch of executives or pallbearers? You know what I'm
Well, yeah,
saying?
that happened when the Marsalis thing came back. They tried to bring back. I mean,
Yeah.
I really understood it when Roy Eldridge told me that it did have to have a certain dignity, and Roy said you have to dress better than the best dressed person who comes to hear you. Roy felt that way,
I
and
feel I feel that that's basically what I'm saying too. I feel the same way, like okay, unless a guy comes in a tuxedo or some stuff.
But anyway, I went all the way uptown to sit in with Freddie, and he says, "Yeah." I said, "You invited me to sit in." He says, "Yeah, but you look at you." He said, "You're not dressed sharp enough to play with my band." So I was very upset, and I
Yeah.
said, "Come on, Freddie, please, come on, man. It's a long, almost a 2-hour subway ride, and I really was excited about, I was like just 17. I was like, come on, change your mind. Come on, please, Freddie." So I begged him, I bugged him long enough. He said, "All right, sit in." And then he thought he was going to get me. He calls "The Song Is You" and like in one.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I had been practicing that week at least an hour a day on just "The Song Is You" in every
Yeah.
key, every tempo, and I was ready for it.
That's
And
good.
and after that, he liked me.
One time I sat in with him and it was without a song. I got the record. If you got there's a record that he
I, I
plays
think
that on.
I think Eddie Daniels is on it with him.
Yeah, it's a European something or other.
Yeah, and
And
Eddie plays on that with
I
him.
mean, it's totally screwed up. It's like they don't know the tune or something. I feel the
That's a
same way
little bit
about
high.
a lot of stuff on Red Clay. That record. It's like they didn't know the tunes or something. It was kind of weird, some of it. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know if I got through that whole record, but I know Chet used to play that "Mr. Clean," which is that from Red Clay, I think.
Well, no, that was from ba-da-da-da-da-ba-ba-da-dee-dee-dee-da.
Yeah,
Weldon Irvine. That wasn't on Red Clay. That was on
okay.
some other record. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly heard Freddie on the earlier, like before Red Clay, before any of the funk
Yeah.
kind of things,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then, I mean, I talked to him about that. I said, well, it was a little disappointing for me, some of those records you made for Columbia, for George Butler and everything. He said, yeah,
Yeah.
they were disappointing for me too, but they bought me my house.
Yeah. Yeah. I
you know,
was first time I heard Freddie Hubbard was he was like 24 in Jazz Workshop in Boston. It was him and James Spaulding and Ronnie Matthews, Eddie Kahn, and they just made that record Breaking Point, and Clifford Jarvis, and
yeah, I remember.
that blew me away. I really liked it, a lot.
Yeah,
It
that was
was
a great record. Now, Woody Shaw was another, that had these problems too. That could be, real friendly to you, and then, kind of turn around behind it. And I think he was, plus the fact he was losing his sight and everything. And I think also, I mean, drugs. Let's say part of the bipolar problem in
I
some
suppose
ways.
that some of that, yeah, Woody
I
was.
mean,
I used to go ahead.
cocaine could make Mother Teresa bipolar. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
I mean,
Woody Shaw was living in the Bay Area for a minute, and he used to play every Monday night at a place called the Both And Club, which was the jam session, and he and Eddie Henderson would be there trying to cut each other. That's one of the things I learned from cutting contests is uh, the only guy that's going to win is the guy that you're trying to play like. You know, those people try to outplay other people. You know, they try to play like other people. Like I went one time outside, like four of us sat in with Dizzy Gillespie, and come time for the break on Night in Tunisia, everybody tried to play the highest and the fastest they could. I played like four notes, you know, and Dizzy comes up to me and says, "I like the notes you play." So there you go, you know. But you know, same thing happened with Woody, but that's another story. But anyway, we were in San Francisco, and Art Blakey was just forming as a new band, and it was with Carter and Woody Shaw and
Carter Jefferson meets
Steve Turry. It was Turry then. I guess it's Turry now for a while.
Ray.
But anyway, it was so in the back room, Woody Shaw probably thought I was trying to get his gig. I don't know, maybe I was just auditioning, whatever. But oh, he totally went off on me, like it was just brutal, you know. But then after that, as your years went by, we had experiences actually playing together, and where I learned is no cunning test, and you hold your own. And he started treating me with big respect and everything. And even like had Stafford James call me one day, he said, Woody Shaw would like you to call him. And it was like 2 weeks before he lost his arm.
Oh.
And he was out there, but still he was like, and he, you know, these people from Montana, these guys that they had a trio that the first time I played with them, they didn't know the vamp on Bye Bye Blackbird. And but anyway, they got real good, and they would bring people out. And Woody Shaw was one of them. And he said, "You have a world-class trumpet player from here." I mean, he was very polite and very, you know. He had said, "I want you to sit in with the big band tonight, the Monday night big band." I'm honored. You know, this is what happened one time. John Hicks was playing Ricky Ford, and I came in, and we just went up on the bandstand. And every time I was feeling my oats, and Woody was. I played everything up an octave that he played. You know, it's just I felt good. You know, I wasn't trying to outshine anybody. It's just that's what I felt. You know, I could do that, and I even got a little paranoid. He went in the back, and my ex-wife was sitting at the bar. Says, "I usually play better than this." and then one time we kind of bonded. We had similar stories with our ex-wives. I think betrayals from our ex-wife, big betrayals. You know, from our
Yeah, Woody
ex-wives.
had that history.
You know, and um, so you know he had just been to Japan and was he was up, and like I had just broken up with my wife, and I was like, to keep from going nuts, I was practicing 6 hours a day, and so I'm in the Vanguard one night, and he says the big band wants me to sit in with them. I'd be honored if you'd sit in with me. I said, Woody, I've had a few beers. I don't have a horn. I don't have a mouth. I'll play my flugelhorn. I insist. And I sat in with them, and you know, we were there, you know, and then you know, and then the next time, I was a friend of James Clay, and I was sitting in with Red Garland over at Lush Life, and Woody walks in with Dexter and says, "Jack, can I borrow your horn and sit in?" You know, I'm full of my oats now. I'm like, you know, yeah, sure, Woody, of course, you know, carve me a new asshole. So there you go with cutting contests, you know what
Yeah,
I
well, there
mean?
was, yeah, I mean, well, there
On my
used to
own horn, you know.
be more camaraderie, you know. I mean, like one night, Ira Sullivan and I were in Baltimore, actually. There was
Yeah.
a club there called the Bandstand.
Hmm.
Ira did this thing with the Left Bank Jazz Society, and we had a mutual friend who actually paid my fare and my hotel to come down and sit in with Ira at this concert. And then at
Yeah.
night, McPherson had also sat in the afternoon. So Ira and I said, let's go hear Charles. He had a gig at night with Reggie Johnson and Reuben Brown and his son, Charles Jr., on drums.
Yeah.
So Ira and I, we went down and we played the whole night with Charles McPherson. Ira only played trumpet that night and flugelhorn, and I played, you know, alto and a little bit of soprano. And Ira said it was very funny. He said, I don't know if you guys realize it. He said, but at the beginning of the night, you sounded just like you, and Charles sounded just like Charles. And by the end of the night, you were sounding like him, and he was sounding like you.
Who was Charles again?
McPherson,
Oh, okay. All
you know, I
right.
call him McPherson. But you know, we were you know, we're good friends and we still are for many years. When I joined Mingus's band, I was
Yeah.
supposed to replace him, and he
Yeah.
coached me. He said, "Give Mingus a little Johnny Hodges here. He likes
Yeah.
to do that," and you know, gave me advice. But he said that happened with Lockjaw and Griffin too.
Yeah.
Ira said that beginning when they first got together, he heard that band when they first. Then he heard them 6 months later, and they sounded like each other. And,
Yeah.
completely, but to some extent. But this let's talk. I mean, just back to the insanity idea for a minute. I have had various times in my life, including the present, where I've been in different kinds of psychotherapy. Just basically,
Yeah.
I've had a Freudian and I've had a eclectic, and I don't know what school the guy I've been with now.
Yeah.
But it's been going on since 4 or 5 years at least. When I was in a rehab for my emphysema first, and the whole thing happens at this when you've been confronted with you've been kind of near to death, as I was. You need some therapy for that alone, not to mention all the other stuff that's happened to you in your life. And I know that I was going to talk about spiritual disciplines that I remember. Is there a time, and maybe you still do it, but you and John Tank, our buddy, very great saxophone player, were you into the Nashir and Shoshu?
Yeah, we did that for a minute. They changed their name now. They broke off from the group. It's a Soka Gakkai now.
Yeah, I heard there were two factions now, and politics.
It just got silly, and it was silly. Those meetings, AAO, morning sun shining bright, la la, and like, I mean, two lesbians making out in what's supposed to be technically a church service of some kind. I mean, I have nothing against lesbians making out. Hey, they're fun to watch, right? But not during a church service. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, that was a strange. I had a girlfriend for a while that was into it, so I went to a couple of meetings there and saw Buster Williams. I got to talk to Buster a little, hang out. But I never, like Paul Bley put it so well. He told me once, he says, I've never joined any organization because I was always afraid they would make me their leader.
I went to a couple of this Soka Gakkai or Segojikai, whatever they call it now, like memorials for dead folks. One was Jerry Murphy. Did you know Jerry Murphy, the drummer?
No, but I went to Coriel.
Yeah. Oh, did he have one over there?
Yeah, he had one.
And I don't know what your experience was, but another one was this girl, Linda Reynolds, who was Mike Clark's ex-girlfriend. And even though they've kind of broke up, but they were always together, kind of, but not really as boyfriend and girlfriend. We were good friends and everything. I really took it hard. And so I went to a memorial, and with Jerry Murphy's, not so much. I got in the middle, but with this is it. I got offended. First, I go in there and they're charting this what they call daimoku, which is Mamyo Horenge Kyo, and then they go through their whole little book, and now it's time for the memorial, right? And like
pass it over,
and like it's so exclusive. I would have liked to got up and said something about her, I don't belong to that, but I would like to have said something. Her sisters were there. One of the sisters didn't like that stuff so much. But anyway, so, her sisters said a couple of words, and then Mike Clark gave a speech, and then they played a tune. And after that, they spent, Buster Williams for at least 50 minutes was talking about the goddamn religion. Trying, you should join this religion. And the same thing as I saw on Jerry Murphy's thing, where he had page 1 was about Jerry Murphy. The rest of it was about the goddamn religion. I went over to St. Peter's for a bunch of things. I didn't hear anybody trying to make me be a Catholic. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I was really offended by all that, I was also actually offended at Sue Mingus's funeral because I should have just grabbed the microphone because everybody was talking, oh yeah, me and Sue Mingus go all the way back to 1999 or some shit, and like I knew her longer than anybody, you know what I'm saying? But the Mingus office has just totally erased me. They don't even mention my name when when they do an article about the big man. They have a bunch of other people that played a couple of gigs with them. You know, they don't realize that I started with my arrangements and Mingus's arrangements. You know,
Well,
but anyway.
you were left out of those the last Mingus records, which had like everybody in the world on them.
Well, actually I did it. Did they a couple of those? I don't know. Did you hear them? Were
No,
they available?
you said I remember once we were talking, and you said that you had been left out of uh, one of the last records of Mingus.
Well, I was left out of. I was doing. We overdubbed solos. That's not jazz. Miles Davis started that shit, and he claimed he wasn't playing jazz, didn't he? You know, and you know, so here I am. I got another guy's taking a solo, and not only do I have to react to him, but the rhythm section, there's no reaction with me. That's not jazz. Overdubbing solos. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
well, I mean, even Music Minus One records, when I do my master classes, sometimes I compare it to making love to an inflatable doll.
yeah,
You can be fantastic, but it's never going to
yeah.
respond to you. You know.
But they did a Zoom thing, and they had a bunch of people, and they didn't even call me. I guess Eric Mingus was really pissed off. I found out about it, and everybody got to talk for 10 minutes except that Charles McPherson was going to talk for 15. You know, and like so I managed to get on there. We'll give you 5 minutes. You know, I mean nobody knows Mingus's music more than me. You know. And so it turned out, and Charles McPherson said, "I'd give up some of my time if it's, you know." I
Yeah,
mean,
he's a
it
very
was a
generous cat.
it was a real slap in the face. And he asked me, and he says, um, I played, I played with Mingus the longest stretch of anybody, and McPherson and Charles says, well, I played with him 10 years, off and on. People would piss you off, he'd fire people, they'd leave after a couple gigs or whatever. And he asked me, well, how long did you play with him? I said 4 years straight. Oh, you couldn't imagine that. You know what I'm saying? So, it's I mean, he was nice about it and everything. I mean, I've been, I was never into him that much, but I've been checking him out lately, and I realized when you get old, man, you got some licks. You get some licks. I said the same thing about Britt Woodman one time. I even used him on a record because, like, he was the oldest trombone player that I've known since that, recent years. I mean,
You were talking about McPherson just now, or
well, I mean, both these guys, you played an instrument for 70 years, and you're gonna got some if you got some shit together. If you're gonna
oh yeah.
if you have a brain, and don't just jump on a hot riff and write it home.
Well, and Charles has always been growing. He's always been trying to. I mean, he stays within, his own aesthetic boundaries. But I mean, I've heard him.
But it's playing. But I know
he's never been complacent.
Yeah,
Charles has always been adventurous.
Only a few people can get away with this one note thing. Like Art Blakey was one. He did, when you think about it, he really didn't change anything over the whole time that he was there, doing his thing. But it was so great that he could get away with it. I mean, sort of Horst Silver at first, like, was really out. It was really out there and doing a lot of things. But then I don't know. It just became, for me, it just became so like repetitious and it wasn't happening, to tell you the truth. I auditioned with him and I could have got the gig, but then I decided I wanted to play like me, so I didn't get the gig. But plus I was making $2,200 a week with Mingus, and then he wanted to pay $400. But that was a factor. And pay your own hotel, and again.
Something to do with. Well, I mean, just back to the therapy thing. I mean, have you ever felt that you needed, assistance? Like, I mean, or just somebody to talk therapy of some kind. Have you ever?
Well, I took a depression. I took the depression thing. And I talked to a guy's a therapist, kind of a Jungian hippie therapist, just because so I can say what I want. I mean, you tell anybody something nowadays that you don't agree with it, they think you're attacking them, and they'll probably never speak to you again. But I can say things, I can disagree with the guy. It's like one of the things that was like was the when Guantanamo Bay, remember years ago, there came a rumor that people were throwing the Bible on the ground, the Quran on the ground, and people were killing each other over that in Pakistan. And I said, it's just a goddamn man-made object. It's a book, you know?
Yeah, I know that
And
feeling.
he said, well, you got to realize the culture. And this, I don't give a shit about that. It's a book. That's what it is. You know, I don't care
Right,
what
but if you're a
culture.
fundamentalist, it's a perfect book. You know, if you talk to a fundamentalist
It's still a
of
man-made
Orthodox
object.
Jews, yeah,
It's
I
still,
know. I'm with you.
and
And
there's a thing about not worshiping idols, you know? And so it's, you know, but
I know
yeah,
what you mean.
but, you know,
Well,
I
that's
can
what
disagree. But
I think.
also,
Go ahead.
Also, you know, so they had me on the Prozac, and I was taking all these big amounts of this shit, and I realized one day, you know, I'd rather, if I'm going to have my downs, I'd like to have some ups too. So that was bullshit, you know, and then that got stupid, like the um uh, you know, I was going to these people, they were psychiatrists, I guess. Psychiatrists are just medical doctors. They don't know you. They just give you prescriptions, you
They
know.
prescribe drugs
Yeah, and
often.
it
That's
says, "How's your week?" So I, you know, was talking about the level of the cat died and the dog ran off and the, you know, and everything. And I said, you know, and I could see I just got so tired. It's well, how do you feel about that? You know, it's like, you know, the way I feel, I think it's about time for me to get a high-powered rifle, go up on the Empire State Building, and start picking people off. You know, oh my God. I mean, they don't know when they're being put on. You know, another time I was in a group and they were all this whining was going on. And I said, well, I couldn't conclusion that maybe suicide is the most optimistic thing you can do because you come to the conclusion that anything's better than this. You know?
and we've all been there.
and like,
Being
you know,
honest.
oh my God, you know, they don't know when, you know, they ask these dumbass questions. How do you feel like that? Well, my dad died yesterday. How do you feel about it? You know, it's like, how do you fucking think I feel? Excuse my French. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
we're on national whatever it
But
is.
whatever, we're allowed, you know. But yeah, well, that's, you know, I remember I once asked this, like, I had a female psychiatrist back in Boston like 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I asked her, I said something, you're not supposed to talk about their life at all. So I said, you know, how long have you been? I'm on the couch and I'm saying, well, how long have you been doing this? And how long do you think I've been doing this?
Yeah.
Everything was turned around. What's your life? Well, what do you think my life is like? I thought, okay, well, you know, I'll fantasize.
You know,
Yeah,
I was in California and I went to a guy and I was talking to him. He said, "You sound like you live in a whole different world." I said, "Well, yeah, I'm a musician." You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
right.
But the one that got me was my first wife, the schizophrenic. They suggested I come in and talk to this guy about a little bit of stuff, about some stuff, and to see if I'm bonkers too. And like so we're talking, and he's like, at one session I go in there, and I know he was trying to get a rise out of me. He had just come from McDonald's, and he was sucking that sucking sound through a straw for the whole hour. You know, probably trying to get me to say something. You know, I'm not gonna fall for that. But anyways, he says, what's going on? I said, well, you know, I really get tired of going and doing these interviews to get a job and you know, having to play up to these people and this and that, you know, and oh, but we all do that. I said, listen to me. You know, you worked here. How did you do to get your job here? You filled out a form, you did an interview, you got the job, right? Yeah. Well, imagine doing that 8 hours a day, which like we do, right?
Yeah,
And oh, you can go, you're okay. You know, it's like they don't know anything, you know, they just know what they're like, you know, most people now that are in power, they've got everything from a book, you know. There was, I mean, now they think of a CEO should be the president of a company. Well, Trump was a CEO. He's a dictator. That's what a CEO is. And now I was watching the Republican debates a little bit. It was just like so boring. And this guy Ramaswamy and says, we need a good CEO to run the country.
right. I heard that.
Well, a corporation is supposed to make money. I mean, a government is not supposed to make a profit, you know. But of course they do, but they're not supposed to. But we don't live in capitalism anymore. Capitalism's dead now. It's like corporate state, which is almost like communism because you don't have no choices. Everything is the same. The little mom and pop stores and those people who go out of where you find a good mechanic. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And it's
There's no more direct contact with your environment.
no.
That's kind of been cut down. Ira Sullivan told me that about, oh man, like 40 years ago. He said he was at a shopping center, and all of a sudden, all the kids stopped everything they're doing. They started running over to this cart, and it was a balloon man.
Yeah.
And he said, this is probably of last. In other words, years ago, it was common. You'd see the balloon man in the street, or you'd buy a balloon for your kid, or and you got to know the people, just like you got to know your milkman and there was your corner store, and you did all this. And he predicted this like Nostradamus, like 40 years ago. Ira says, this is all going to go away.
Yeah.
Direct contact with the environment is going to be replaced by corporate, corporations, and
there's no humanity whatsoever. Nothing. It's I was like, I had my money in this financial institution, and there was an office in Billings, Montana. And because I'm from that, we all knew each other personally, the people in the office, people know each other. But now they've expanded. They've closed that office and a bunch of it is now in Seattle. And I sent my I don't know what happened. I thought I sent it. My refund from the IRS and from the New York taxes. I sent that was over 2 weeks ago, and they never received it. Maybe I put the wrong address because it said I wrote South Fifth Avenue or some old, don't write South. Well, that's the address they gave me.
Well, often it's somebody on their side too.
Oh yeah, well, I mean,
2002. We get to 2003. My wife deals with most of that stuff for us, but she'll do reports now and then. They didn't get that because such and such.
Well, they don't give a shit about us. I mean, the thing is also, I got it with Merrill Lynch once, and the only thing I ever did, and I went in person and deposited a check for $5,000, and they lost it. So now I got it. I don't know how I'm going to deal with the IRS and all this crap now to get my money back, because it was a little amount of money that helps a lot. You know what I'm saying?
I know.
It's you never anything. I go to CVS. I do a prescription, and I'm pushing the buttons. And I say, I need this prescription. They says, well, you need the prescription. We need a doctor's approval to renew it. Would you like us to do that for you? Push one. Okay, one. Boom. I go in there to pick my other prescriptions, and they didn't have the ones that needed a doctor's approval because they tell me now that all those calls go right to corporate. And they don't do that anymore. They don't notify doctors anymore. So in other words, it's out and out lying to you.
They lied to you. They said,
yeah.
Yeah, well,
and the thing is they make us take out our anger on the people working from them. They're in the same boat as we are, I mean, they make them $15 an hour if they're lucky, and they're both of us, they're employees and consumers in corporations. We're the scum of the earth. I mean, the corporations get together and set prices. We're not going to have too much competition because, they set prices, you know what I mean? And they've been doing that for a while. You go to a small city like Billings, Montana. You got all this Home Depot and Walmart and all this kind of stuff. They come in and they undercut everybody, put everybody out of business. Then they raise the prices. But on top of that, they all have the same distributor.
But then I watch the news, and they're saying that Walmart is closing in like 15 locations, and there's all these things, So, and I really feel we don't belong. There's something going on that just doesn't include us in it. So I think we should talk about what includes us, which is the history.
Well, it does include us because we have to live in it. I mean, the people who work at Walmart can't even afford to. They have to sleep in the stock room.
Wow.
But it does include us. And it's especially now. I mean, when they're trying to stop free speech and stop all this stuff, and it does include us because we have to live with it, you know.
Well,
And
that's true.
and also, like, I mean, everything's personal. One time I wrote this thing about Peter Brotzman on my Facebook. I said, you know, I never liked this guy. I mean, he walked out on one of my gigs, which I can understand because, you know, I don't know what he was expecting to hear, but you know who I'm talking about, right? I mean, it's honking and screaming from
He's a free jazz saxophone player, isn't he?
well, they call it free and they call it jazz, but it's like,
Yeah, I use that as a very
you
loosely.
know, but it's all just honking and screaming. It was effective on one record I heard do Don Cherry did with Penderecki. And all of a sudden he jumps in there and takes a solo for a minute screaming, and yet it kind of a nice change from all the boring shit
Yeah, right.
going on before. But you know, I'm talking about, you know, can somebody give me an example? I've spent like 2.5, 3 hours on YouTube looking for something. I mean, there's examples. Albert Ayler playing the blues and playing. I mean, he even went back to playing tunes, you know, when he got more famous. And these people, you know, playing, you know, in their early careers, at least attempting to play music, you know, play tunes and everything. And like, I couldn't find anything. Oh, he's a genius. You know, you don't know, you're clueless. You don't know anything. And then you're attacking a dead man. I'm not attacking a dead man. I'm talking about the goddamn music. You know, that's everybody takes everything personally. If you criticize somebody that somebody doesn't like, they think you're attacking them personally, even though they never met you.
Yeah,
know?
that's happened. I think that's one of the direct results of social media too. That everybody tends to take everything, not everyone, but many of us, many people take things personally, like what you're saying. You know, if you didn't care for Albert Ayler, I mean, you know, I mean, I have to, you know, there's a record for some reason called what's it called? Mothers, with Gary Peacock and Sonny Murray and the Ayler brothers. And for some reason, one night I must have been too high or something, but I put on the record, and all this made it made me feel peaceful. I don't know what happened, but it was going on.
Something, you know, but you know, the All You Need Is Love, the Beatles tune, they got that from Albert Ayler because Paul McCartney was heavy listening to Albert Ayler a lot. He liked to put on the records when friends came over. if they say it too long, you know.
That's funny.
But you know, and I was there, couldn't find anything, and like still, you know, I'm clueless and I'm destroying a guy's reputation. No, I'm not. You know, anytime I criticize any musician for their rotten personalities, maybe I'll talk about Buddy Rich or Lionel Hampton. But if I'm going to talk about their music, they can play. You know, I saw Buddy Rich. I never saw anybody act like that once. I went to I saw a rehearsal because a friend of mine was joining the band, and I don't know, he had dancing girls and everything. And he was sitting there, and just the way he talked to everybody, it was so demeaning and everything. And Rick Laird just put his bass down and said, "This is bullshit," and walked off the gig. That was it.
Well, there was another side to Buddy too, believe it or not. One night.
Well, yeah, there's another side to everybody, you know.
Well, one night I was not playing down at St. James Infirmary, Hot O'Brien's club, with Chet Baker, and Mincer was on the band and a couple of other cats that we know. You know, a guy walks in and he says, "Man, I got some good pot. Anywhere we can go to smoke?" And I said, "Yeah, we got a back room here that you know we can get away with that there." You know, so we go to the back room, smoke a joint, and I said, "Yeah, this is nice." And then another guy comes in, also from Buddy's band. They were playing. We went a little later than them, so they come in afterwards. Another guy from Buddy's band says, "Hey, man, anywhere we can go to, you know?" And I go, and I say, "Gee, you guys, you all scored tonight." He said, "Oh, Buddy likes this band. He gave us all an ounce of pot each." He said the whole band got an ounce all on Buddy, you know, because he says this is the best band he's had in a long time. So, you know, there was even that side to him. And, you know, so, but, you know, I was thinking with the avant-garde quote, or whatever you want to call it, I think Mingus called it the last refuge of the untalented.
Could be, you know.
He described with that quote.
I noticed when a lot of those guys started getting a lot of play, then they started playing with better musicians, and they would play more music. You know what I'm saying? instead of just that all the time, because you can't do that 7 nights a week, that noise making. Brotsman could, I guess, but maybe he was a genius. When you think about it, he managed to we would get like hundreds of recordings, and but another thing I get is like when Wynton came on the scene, I thought, great, after all that stuff in the 70s, the only people that really seem to be playing that were trying something were Mingus and McCoy Tyner, where there's Miles Davis was playing all that rock stuff, which I never cared for because I had done that Chitlin circuit. I knew what he was trying to do. It was too fast. There was no bottom, and it wasn't funky, so he lost me on that pretty much. I mean, there's moments. Everybody has one or two. There's moments, and I was. Those were the two bands, but then Wynn came along. And I said, "Great, man! Here's a guy that he plays changes. He's in tune. He's got a nice sound, and he's got his own thing. He actually sounded like he had his own thing, But then he went into like he said, he fell in love with his act, and became the spokesman for jazz, and like he did a whole thing, a PBS thing once, and he went to Montana to play, and he went to my friend's house, and the guy put on Kenny Dorham, and Wynton says, "Who's that?" "That's Kenny Dorham." He'd never heard of Kenny Dorham after he'd already been did a documentary for PBS.
Well, this is what I always tell this story that Clifford Jordan, when Wynton was first a little bit around that time when he was getting this fame and being a spokesman and all that stuff, and he'd already invaded Miles' gig in Vancouver. I was there that night because I was playing that festival that year. But anyway, I said to Clifford, "Well, Cliff, what do you think of this guy Wynton Marsalis?" And without hesitation, he said, "I'd like to lock him in a room with a big bag of pot and a stack of Kenny Dorham records."
I know. I guess he would put down Kenny Dorham later on, but anyway, people. This is a perfect example. People would come up to me, and like I said, and then he started. I didn't like it so much. I mean, this was this one record at the Opera House, I think it's called, with with Charlie Hayden, and he sounds like he sounded like Al Hurt.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe that. I used to like Al Hurt, he could play, but I mean, I could see why. I mean, Al Hurt was his music teacher for one of his music teachers, gave him his first horn. But anyway, like a guy asked me one day, "Well, do you like Wynton playing?" "Well, not especially." And I said, then he says, "Oh, but he can play the trumpet." "Why are you telling me that? When I play the trumpet, I know he can play the trumpet." One day I do want to see how good is this guy really. So I took out the Arbenz book, and the back of the book, he recorded some of those things, and I tried to play Carnival of Venice and all this stuff with him, and I just closed the book. There's no way, you know what I'm saying? But, the other stuff is like, I didn't find that profound or even that
well, yeah,
expert, and like I told him one time, I said, you're the only classical trumpet player I can stand, man. I never liked that whole thing. That
yeah. Well, a friend of mine said, who plays both, is basically a classical musician, said that the best thing he ever heard him play was his cadenza on the Hummel trumpet concerto.
Yeah,
says Wynton plays a wonderful cadenza on that.
It was Haydn's trumpet concerto.
I thought it was Hummel, but it was Haydn.
It was Haydn, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. That's the record where I think that's the record. No, it's a different one. He plays with a concert band.
One thing I miss. I was thinking,
but I told him, and it's like, why are you telling me that? Yeah, I know he's just, can play the trumpet. I play the trumpet. I know who can play the trumpet and who can't. It's just people. I don't know. They get so, another guy started calling me names one time when I didn't like this Blood on the Fields thing. That's you get a Nobel Prize or whatever the fuck.
Blood on the Tracks, I think it was called.
Yeah, and it was just so cliched and
I didn't find much in that either.
Yeah.
But,
But,
I think one thing that's changed a lot, though.
I guess I think he's nicer now. He seems nicer and more humble now, But, did you ever play a thing by Mingus called Started Melody?
Nope.
Well, it's a contrafact based on I Can't Get Started. And
I played that with him many times.
It's a very difficult line, and we were supposed to do it for Epitaph, and Wynton had the part, and he asked me to play it. So I don't know why he wanted me to play it, because he could play it. I think at that time he just thought, well, this isn't I Can't Get Started. No, it's not. It started melody, and like one time, let's tell you something about that. We were going to Europe, and we had a rehearsal with the Mingus Epitaph, and I'm playing the melody along, and with right before we got on the bus, I'm playing the melody along in unison with Alex Foster, and I'm bending notes and doing all this shit. And Gunther Schuller, did you get how to play that last night in a dream? I said, well, no, Gunther, this is the way Mingus wanted me to play his music, man. You know what he said? Oh, that's not what this is about.
That's not what this is about. Did you say,
Yeah.
well, what is it about? Did you?
Gunther Schuller were making a Broadway show. You know what I'm saying? Because the second time when it was just awful. The one time they took away everybody's solos. I mean, Ronnie Cuber and everybody, the original solos, and they had, and I rehearsal. I jumped in on the only solo I had, and he stopped the music, and I just said, "Look, I don't have anything to prove to you, motherfuckers." And I walked out of the rehearsal, And then when I came back, always a high point of the show when I was directed as like a sextet or a septet through Better Get It in Your Soul. And I knew the arrangement and everything. And I said, if you're gonna have me improvise anything, you're gonna have me play by the note. And they said, you're not gonna conduct that Better Get It in Your Soul? No, I'm not gonna get this conducted. You got it. And so we go to what's happening.
Gunther, who was going to conduct it?
No, I was going to conduct Better Get It Hit in Your Soul. That's always a high point of the program. Don't conduct.
Who told you that?
Well, no. If you
you're going to play, don't conduct. I think that's.
No, he didn't say it. I said if I'm going to play, improvise anything, you got to pay me by the note.
Oh, pay me by the note. Okay.
But then he says, you're not going to conduct it? No, you got it. If you look at the original movie of Epitaph, we play the thing, and Gunther says, how do you follow that? Because it was the high point of the only jazz in the real thing, and like, so anyway, so I'm doing it, and what they're doing is Craig Handy takes it over, and they play it all wrong. They played the head, and then the whole thing they soloed on the head. Didn't use any of the arrangement, the da 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 da. They didn't do any of that kind of stuff, I said, Craig, man, what the fuck, man? He says, that's not the way it goes. Oh, yes, this is the way it goes. And he showed me a piece of music. You know what it was? It was written in my handwriting. When I was leading the Mingus dynasty, I thought, just instead of jumping into the blues, let whoever takes the first solo on the first chorus and then go into the blues. So he's telling me that this is my arrangement. This piece of music that I wrote. No, this is how it goes in my handwriting.
Did you point that out to him?
Yeah, of course,
Yeah. And then did they do it your way?
I don't remember what happened. One time I was counted off the it was so-called Mingus Orchestra Haitian fight song, and they'll play. You couldn't play the head. Even Cy Johnson said, you can't play it too fast. You can't play the head. And when we played with Jimmy Nepper, it's get down. You know what I mean? It's getting down for Jimmy Nepper was a stretch, but he was getting down. And like I was doing it, and in the middle of the tune, this guy walks in the club and brings the tempo up. I get this shit all the time, Bob. I never got a lot of encouragement or respect from my peers. Most of the people that commented me were people like Dizzy Gillespie, or Larry Coryell was a peer, or Freddie Hubbard, or George Coleman, or Frank, what's his alto player that was in prison? He came back for a while. Frank Morgan. These kind of people. Roger Voisin, the lead trumpet, or the first trumpet player of the Boston Symphony, came up to me and complimented. Those are the people I get comments from. I never got too many comments from people that were, of my generation.
Well,
Dave Liebman, maybe.
I think that one thing that happened, and I was thinking about this, was that with our generation, when we were younger, we experienced the end of a certain type of camaraderie that was interracial, intergenerational, and all these kind of things. Like I remember the festival that you and I played together in upstate Saratoga, New York.
Right.
And the band that was put together for the festival, which Ira Gittler, I believe, put together, was the rhythm section was Albert Daly on piano.
Yeah, I got Anthony Cox on the gig.
Anthony Cox was on it, right? And I got Bobby Ward. So you got the bass player, I got the drummer.
They complained about Anthony Cox because Anthony was a different kind of player, man. He was a more modern,
Anthony played well. I mean, I thought it was a good band. The front line was you and me and Pepper Adams. And I remember Pepper was really funny because he could be, I love Pepper, but he was always very competitive with me. He always wanted to take those prisoners, and I could hold my own with him, so there wasn't too much of a, of a problem. But he really wanted to. He played to kill. But I was deferring to him. I said, "Hey Pepper, what do you want to play?" And he was like, "Why does everybody always ask me that? I don't care. I'll play anything you guys want." I said, "Because you're the oldest." I said, "You're the elder here, and I'm being polite. But now since you don't want me to be polite, I won't be polite, and we'll play what I want." You know what I mean? I said, I felt that I asked you first. But other than that, man, I just remember how much fun those festivals were.
Yeah.
Because you would see people who didn't play alike at all. Like I remember.
Right. Well, I have actually on that time, I've actually felt kind of out of my element or something. So I did what usually one of my thing is like I can't get started my way, which I just rip it all to parts and everything will go anywhere in the tune. And so why did we just have to play on the form of the chord changes all the time? Why can't we do variations on the tune? You know what I'm saying? Not just stick to chord changes. See, that's the thing is like I did a recording of and I even teach this sometimes in my classes. If you take a tune that is Warhorse that really well, okay, I'm recording me and Jimmy Madison and Chip Jackson, where I said, okay, we can go anywhere. Might change key, might go to a different part of the tune, might go into 3/4, might go into a different tempo, might go free for a minute. I'll just totally, instead of just playing the 32 bar form of the changes, actually play on the tune. I have an old Albert Ayler record, one of his first ones, where he does that. He'll play different parts of the tune. I don't know if he did it on purpose.
I thought he was getting lost myself, but
or maybe so. but it was a good idea. I think it's a good idea. Why is it that we just play on the form of the chord changes on a tune?
Well, Hank Jones had a good answer for that because if you do that, it becomes chaos.
Yeah.
And and like it's like Sonny Rollins once said to me. He said, "Bob, I love freedom, but I hate anarchy."
Yeah, well, I did that with a Danny Richmond gig once, just me and Mickey Tucker, and it was totally happened, And then I was at a thing for I tried it with Walter Bishop. We were at a seminar or something, camp in Spain for a while. Man, jazz isn't a guessing game. It's not. Well, I think it is,
I disagree I tend to be with him about that, though.
But later on, when he thought about it for a while, he said, "I'd like to try that again." So,
Yeah, I've never been close to things. I had about a year and a half when I was up in Montreal because there weren't many cats that really could play straight ahead. So I played free with a bunch of painters who played music, and Lyle, very good bass player who played with Cecil Taylor.
Yeah.
Was on that. He was the only other professional musician. And I did that. And I was hanging out a lot with Paul Bley. And Bley would tell me, "Join the avant-garde, Bobby. It's where the money is."
You know, he asked me to come sit in with him and the Jimmy Drufry trio once, and I didn't do that. You know, one of my regrets is I didn't sit in with Coltrane, because if you can't play with that Coltrane, you can't play anything. He'd make anybody sound good. I mean, come on, Dewey Johnson was on his record. You know what I'm saying? Remember him, the trumpet player?
So
And
yeah,
and like I was there with a guy named Peter Loeb. Did you ever know
I
Peter
knew Peter
Loeb?
Loeb very well. Peter Loeb played every instrument.
He was crazy, you know, and like we always made fun of me. Never, I was in his band. He liked me, and he always like in Calvin Hill. That was our first band at Berkeley, and Peter was. They always made fun of me. I don't think he took a shower the whole year that he was there, and
No, he had that very, very long black hair all the way down
he
his
was,
back.
well,
And
he didn't have long hair then, but he had also, and he was acted real arrogant and everything, but he could tell that he was like a one, you know,
he and I used to,
contradictions.
he and I used to practice together. We became pretty good friends for a while. And he made this record that was really good. And I was listening to it one day, and I said, "Boy, that's nice, nice drummer. Who's that?" He said, "Oh, that's me." And piano player sounds.
I'm trying to find a Peter Globe record. Did he record anything
I don't
commercially?
know if it was ever released. He was just playing it for me. We were practicing over at his place, and he had this recording he wanted me to hear. So he played it, and I really sounded good. And he was
Well,
playing saxophone and trumpet and rhythm section and everything, you know. And
I had a
that's the
great, I got a
recording I
great,
ever heard.
I got a great tape from Jimmy Madison. It was just a trio, Peter and him. It was him on one side, and it was great. On the other side was a thing when that I recorded with Jimmy. It was me and Jerry Bergonzi and Jimmy and Jim McNeely and John Burr. Those guys had like got to New York like the day before or something, and that was pretty fucking good. I was in the dressing room playing it for Mike Clark on Herbie Hancock's gig, and he said, "Damn, who are these guys?" Another, you know, compliment. You know, with the other guys, like, you know, Tex Allen.
I remember Tex Allen.
Here's that Ornette Coleman guy. You know what I'm saying? Anybody that didn't try to play like somebody else was Ornette Coleman. You know.
Well, yeah, because Tex was very influenced by Miles, as I recall.
Well, yeah, I know. Everybody was. I got tired of that, man. Everybody
Right,
chromatic
but
and all
Tex
that.
especially. I think
You
his
know.
sister is Phyllis Rashad, right, who played
Well, I know,
on the Cosby
and
Show.
his other sisters, Debbie Allen, the you know the very famous you know Fame. I want to live forever.
Right. Do you know what happened to
Choreographer for that.
Tex?
I
Is
don't
he
know.
still
I
with us?
haven't, you know, I found a record of his. I decided to get it. It's okay. You know, Tex really didn't play that much, but it's good for. It sounds pretty good. You know, I'm surprised that I liked it because I always want to find something good about somebody. You know, I mean, I've heard people really sound bad. There's a record that Tom Harrell that he's playing with I don't know, some cats, there's two other guys, and it's like, I mean, damn, can the guy get a note out of his horn? You
Sometimes
know,
it was a bad day.
there's a
No,
Miles Davis. What's the Miles Davis record? It's the Plug Nickel, I think they put out a set, right? Miles Davis doesn't blow his nose. Like Wayne Shorter is like, I mean, it's the best Wayne Shorter I've ever heard. And Wayne was never
great.
really one of my favorites. You know, I always preferred Joe Henderson, you know. But anywho,
Well,
it's everybody has their bad times. I did this record with Smoke. I got a grant and everything. I'm afraid to because I did it. And I don't know if I'm going to like it. I didn't like the rough cuts because like something happened. I had almost kind of a personal paralysis in my mouth. I play the head in one chorus and I'm finished. And I had this paralysis in my mouth, and it was like I was worried that I had Bell's palsy again. When I went to California, I got Bell's palsy when I first got there. You know.
you know, I was thinking, I saw the Simpsons the other day, by the way. I was thinking of something you said that we talked about a while back. There was a little line in it that I was kind of doing something else actually when I was TV was on, and they said, "Oh, he's going to be on this new TV show where the singers rate the judges." And so I was thinking, remember we were talking about how if you could have musicians critique the critics, in other words, like
Yeah, right.
the review of the latest Joe Henderson record, I find lacking. You tend to be verbose and in love with your own
Yeah.
command the English language, to have some. And didn't you have a situation with Downbeat or something where I know you wrote some things for them, but wasn't there a letter that was published, a review, and you wrote a letter to Downbeat? That was,
Miles Davis?
was it that? And you wrote about it, and
Probably. I gave it a 5-word review. What a bunch of shit.
really,
But then I said, that's cool. I mean, Miles Davis already, let him do what he wants. Look what he's done for the music, I mean, you don't have to worship a guy that's, and like Stanley Krauss was putting him down. But Miles Davis doesn't know anything, anybody. If he wants to be a rock star, let him be a rock star. His last record was Rap. Remember that?
yeah, more or less, yeah.
And, and I don't remember a thing about it. But anyway, it was, let him, and everybody has their bad nights. So, I mean, going to see Miles Davis was live was a crapshoot. I mean, sometimes it was unlistenable. You couldn't
Absolutely,
listen.
yes.
It was just so boring. But they were trying things every night. That was the thing. Also, Sonny Rollins sometimes seemed like he couldn't start a tune.
Well, one night I went to hear Sonny.
Yeah.
This is when the Half Note moved uptown, and we were already friends, and I, had relationships. So I spent my last $10 to get a front table at the new Half Note, which they had to charge me. I never paid a dime to go to the old Half Note, but they said, "Look, Bob, if you want to sit at a table, we'll let you sit at the bar for free. But if you want to be near, I like to be near Sonny's sound." Yeah. So I saved up my money. They said, "We're going to charge you. You got to pay price. Pay." I said, "That's okay." Yeah. So I've spent my last $10 because it wasn't a good year, and I'm sitting at that table, and Sonny is playing, and he's having one of those nights where he's playing, and then he's looking up to the heavens and going, "Oh, really?" And then get back down to playing again. So now he's walking around. He's off the stage, and he's walking through the audience. And, I'm sitting there listening to it, and I feel his sound getting closer to me, and I can hear him scuffling. I can hear him not quite getting what he wants, and I guess I must have grimaced or made something in my face, because next thing I know, he's standing over my table. He takes the horn out of his mouth, and he goes, "Is something the matter?" And he's and walking on.
There was one of the biggest honors I had with Sonny. I went to the Mingus once when he was dying, and Sonny says, "I'm thinking about having you and Ricky on my next record." It didn't happen, but just to be told that, because Sonny Rollins is, I told you I have to be my own favorite trumpet player because I go nuts hearing that same fucking sound every day. If I wasn't.
We all have to do that,
Yeah. And I said Sonny Rollins is my next favorite trumpet player. My favorite trumpet players were mostly saxophone players. There was like Sonny Rollins. Well, I did like Thad Jones and Gene Shaw, but there was Sonny Rollins and Eric Dolphy and Ben Webster are my favorite trumpet players. And now I've noticed lately, when we're practicing, that Jackie Byard has become one of my favorite trumpet players. So, ding, ding, that kind of thing.
He does that kind of thing.
But anyway, one time.
Gene Shaw, by the way, just for those of you who don't know, Clarence Gene Shaw,
right,
didn't make many records. He made about 2 records of his own for art.
And they're totally his own thing.
Yeah, totally his own thing. And the best example I know of him is on Tijuana Moods. He does a version of Flamingo that's so beautiful, and the arrangement is great too that Mingus made of that song. I believe he's also on East Coasting. He's on 2 Mingus records that I know. But if you want to check out an original guy who never got credit, another of those Chicago cats.
Well, yeah, I know. Well, actually, wasn't he from Detroit?
He may have been, but musically he was more from Chicago.
Okay, because there seemed to be a Detroit thing like Thad Jones, and then these cities had different things. At Cleveland, that's where all the people like Albert Ayler and George Adams and those people came from. They had that kind of thing.
St. Louis too, with Dragos. Yeah. I think, I would say New York, Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia were probably the most prolific cities. Chicago, I know Ira Sullivan was from Chicago, and there was a whole period where the cats from Memphis made a stop in Chicago. You had Booker Little, Frank Strozer,
Yeah.
and George Coleman, and they all. It seemed like before New York, Chicago was the place. I remember that either Sonny or Ira told me that Booker Little and Frank Strozer shared a house, and 24 hours a day. If it wasn't them, somebody else was using it to play. There was
Yeah.
music you wanted to play. You just
Yeah.
drove over there and see who was going, and you could play. And that's that's what I mean. There was a camaraderie that when you went to these festivals,
Well, there was a scene. Yeah. It
it
was a
was such a
scene too.
joyous event. I mean, like I remember you told me a story about Ornette Coleman showing up somewhere with Mesro.
Mesro, yeah.
Mesro.
And a Ray Charles gig backstage. And it was Ornette was playing one of the trumpet players' trumpets, and Mesro was in his 80s trying to sell weed.
Right. He created the joint, which was not called a joint. The original name for the joint, as I believe, possibly there were probably others. There were muggles. Muggles was the name for them, but he used to call his joints Mesrolls.
Yeah. But
And
we were talking about how sometimes you go see Giants and they were awful because they were searching for things. There was this one time, Sonny Rollins they had some little festival in Bozeman, Montana, and he played in his park. And there was like 5,000 people in this park come to hear Sonny Rollins. And I was playing with the band we opened for Sonny Rollins. And those guys I tell you about, there's a trio out there. Like I said, when I first played with them, they didn't know the vamp on
by Blackbird.
yeah, but they got pretty good, and they started bringing people out like Woody Shaw, Freddie Hubbard, uh, uh, a bunch of people, and like Eddie Harris, and the bass player got pretty good because he died. The two of them are dead now. The bass player was they're much younger than me. The bass player was playing with Eddie Harris, and also he played with David Murray when David Murray had a pretty good band with Dee Dee Jackson. Did you ever hear Dee Dee Jackson? Kind of like
I did. I heard a record he did for Just in Time.
Kind of like Pulling, you know what I mean? And like so he played this. Sonny Rollins played this concert, and man, the people were yelling and screaming, and he thought they wanted to kill him. They loved his ass, But it's it's I like we were talking about things like as far as Gene Shaw, the best. In my opinion, the best cover of When Sonny Gets Blue ever by anybody that's ever lived is on his record called Debut in Blues.
What's it called? The record? What blues?
Debut in Blues. He made 3 records, and for the Detroit label or the Chicago, whatever it was, and Debut in Blues, and it's totally original. And also, and you probably fight me on this one, but I think the very best version of Summertime ever was Albert Ayler on that record. He Neil's.
My name is Albert Ayler, I think.
Yeah, that's and what I found interesting about that is remember you remember the record When Sonny Meets Hawk?
Yes, very.
How out there Sonny Rollins was on. And on Summertime, when he ends his solo, he plays this really off the wall lick and repeats it. And so that was made in 1974, and the Albert Ayler thing was made.
That was made in 1960.
1964, and the Albert Ayler thing was made in 1963, and he plays the same exact phrase twice at the end of his solo. And I have bootlegs where Sonny Rollins was in Copenhagen in 1963, and I wouldn't be surprised if he went and listened to him, because a lot of people you'd never think like would go listen to, like Lucky Thompson, and these people would go listen to Albert Ayler. I have this whole box set of him playing with the Army band even. I have a record where Don Cherry and Ornette Coleman are playing with Herb Pomeroy's big band when he's at Rochester.
I have a funny Albert Ayler memory. When I was in high school in 1968 in New York City, my dad worked for ESP Records for a while for Bernard Stolman.
Yeah.
Now, my dad was a swing trumpet player who played with Charlie Spivak and Tommy Dorsey, and his style was kind of like in that. So my father, hearing people like Albert Ayler and Giuseppe Logan and all these people recording for ESP, my father was like, this wasn't music to him, but it was something that Bernard said it might sell because it was a trend in jazz.
Yeah.
So now this is a funny thing. I lived at the Greystone Hotel in 96th and Broadway. So I could play at night in the basement when the help went home, the maids went home and everything. And I would practice in the basement sometimes all night. Or when I went out to clubs, I'd get back at about 3 a.m. and I could practice from 3 till about 6:30 when the help came in. So, but in the daytime, I would practice at the ESP studios in the 20s. So there were a few rooms.
So hold on to that thought. I got to ferocious have to go to the bathroom. Okay, hold on. So tell a joke.
Well, we can take a pause. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a pause while Jack goes to the bathroom, and I'll try to get us back to talk about music with Jack Walrath.
But do
There's
tell
a
him.
comedian named Pete Barbuti who did some very funny things. He was basically a musician's comic, but he did the Tonight Show a lot. You know, he was actually mainstream. He did in the days of the 60s when you had the Griffin Show, Merv Griffin and Mike Douglas and Johnny Carson. He did a lot of that. And one of the jokes that he would tell, sometimes he did things like playing the piano with his nose and very funny things. Barbuti, Barbutti. He's still around. He's like 90 years old. And I just saw an interview with him and he looks like he's 70. And, but anyway, he told a story. There was a concert, a benefit, and Harry Truman was president. Oh,
Sorry about that.
all right. Well, I was telling the other story. I was going to tell people this story, which is true. Harry Truman, Pete Barbuti tells this. Pete Barbuti, that there were Harry Truman was an amateur piano player, and so they had a benefit to do. And
Who is this? Harry Truman? Yeah.
Yeah. So they put a trio together. You said to tell a story, so I was doing this. So they put a trio together to play this benefit of some kind, war bonds or something. And they have Truman on piano, and they're going to play the tune, the Missouri Waltz, which maybe you know. I don't know that song. But the three people in the trio were Truman on piano, James Petrillo on trumpet, who was the president of the Musicians
Union. Yeah.
And initiated the famous recording ban because he was afraid people weren't going to listen to live music if there was too many records out. That was what they say. And the third member of the trio was Albert Einstein on violin.
Okay.
So they played the tune, and I guess Einstein's chops were down because he was supposed to be a pretty good player. Was probably the strongest of the three musically. But anyway, they played the tune, and the tune was really ragged.
Yeah.
And afterwards, Petrillo was said to have remarked to Einstein, "Hey man, can't you count?"
Well, Nixon didn't. I think Nixon sat in with Duke Ellington's band, didn't he? Played piano.
Nixon could actually play a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and it's sad to note that Basie and Spiro Agnew were close friends, which one doesn't like to think about that. But anyway, I want to tell you the Albert Ayler story.
Okay, well, let me tell you one thing since we're on about these people. Alan Greenspan. Remember Alan Greenspan? I have a record he's playing with these guys. He used to be like, he used to, be friends with like Stan Getz and Zoot Sims. He was in that crowd and everything. And later on, he said, after all that, he said, I should have stuck to the saxophone.
Yeah, right. He should have. I think he was a friend of Lady Tristano's too. You know, he was kind of
probably, involved. Yeah. So go tell me that other story.
Yeah, so I would be practicing. I'm like learning Green Dolphin Street and playing there will never be, the standards. I was 16 years old, and I'm practicing. And in the next room, Albert Ayler and Donald Ayler are playing, ghosts and their repertoire. So while I'm practicing my standards, I can hear in the background them rehearsing together. The two of them are playing duets. So I'm playing da 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 and improvising on the changes, but in the background I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So, I said that's why there's always a little avant-garde Because one guy told me once, he said, you think the beboppers think you're avant-garde, and the avant-garde thinks you're a bebopper. So, you're
So-
thoroughly not accepted by anybody, like you too.
I like to play ghosts sometimes on the bandstand. If the band doesn't know it or not, I'll just show it to them on the bandstand and play it because it's a calypso thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a nice tune, actually. But I would meet them, I would talk to them, but it was really funny because they didn't have much to say. I'd say, hi, guys. And they both, the two silver beards on each side, the little goatee, not even goatees, whatever you call it, pharaoh beards.
Yeah.
They would look at me like, I'd say, gee, I don't know what to say to those guys. It seems like hello stumps them. It was like,
I was a guy was actually commissioning me. I got to get my ass off the couch and get to it. I've been trying to find some funny things to put in. Commission me to write he's got an ensemble to commission me to write a arrangement for ghosts for clarinet, 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, baritone, sax, guitar, piano, bass, and drums. So, and I'm trying to figure out these hip harmonies and stuff. I listened to I went back and listened to the record with Gary Peacock and them where they play ghosts. That's the most definitive version, probably. They're playing chord changes. Peacock is playing some chord changes, beneath
he's on the head at least. I mean, afterwards, I'm not quite sure what's happening. But, then that's about, Sonny actually told me that he had been listening a lot to Albert Ayler.
Sonny Rollins?
Yeah, because we were talking about Sonny Meets Hawk. And his first comment when I said, the way you play on Sonny Meets Hawk, I mean, this is many years ago. He says, so the weather today, it's rather unusual. And he just started meaning he really didn't want to talk about it. But then I kind of asked him, I told him about my dad working for ESP. I told him this story of hearing Albert Ayler through the walls. And he said that he was hip to Albert Ayler at that time.
Yeah.
He'd been listening to Ornette, and he met Ornette and had done some hanging out with him. And he said, practiced with him. So it was, it was something that he didn't go into great detail, but he said he was well aware of Albert Ayler, and he was well aware of Archie Shepp. He had been listening to those cats, that at that time it was something that he, which is to be expected of, Sonny. I mean, he was always listening to.
I'm sure he listened to everybody. I used to go see John Hammond a lot. Even when I was going to Berkeley, I always wanted to get a record date. I'd go see John Hammond. One time in his office, he has the big studio tapes of Albert Ayler up on the shelf. And he says, this is very, very intense, but I think it's important.
Really?
Yeah, that's what he said. But also about Sonny Rollins is like, one of my favorite Ornette Coleman records is Ornette on tenor. He sounds like Sonny. He sounds like Sonny Rollins, And
there's a lot of Sonny
and then another thing, when Archie Shepp, they kept saying that he was Coltrane. I think he sounded more like Sonny Rollins than he did Coltrane, to tell you the truth.
On Fire Music, there's that calypso he plays on Fire Music that is very Sonny oriented. I forget what it's called. I think it's Rufus swung his head down, and it's got a very long poetic, negatively poetic title.
Well, I remember Jerry Bergonzi when we were playing bands together. He sounded like Wayne Shorter, but he became
and he played more like Joe Henderson.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and I don't know. Well, Peter Loeb would sound like Roland Kirk when he first came to Berkeley. He played the 2 horns.
That's right. Well, that's what he would do. He'd sit in with us with Chet, and he'd do the 2 horn thing.
Yeah.
And that was there are some people. Did you ever get to know Rahsaan at all? Or
Roland Kirk he was still Roland Kirk was the very first musician I ever sat in with.
Really?
Yeah, I belonged to the Columbia Record Club, and I would get these records, and one of them I got was Kirk in Copenhagen, and he played this tune called Mingus Griff Song. And the record just knocks me out. It's very rugged, very raw. J.C. Moses is on drums, and Montelieu, I think, is a piano player. It's very rugged record, and I like the shit out of it. I like the rugged music. The music is too clean a lot of times, I think, but anyways, he had the song. So anyways, my friend and me, we go to the jazz workshop, and Roland Kirk is playing, um and I asked if we can sit in, and he says, well, what do you want to play? And so I know there's this tune of yours called Mingus Griff Song. I would like to play that. Said, okay, I'm going to play. I couldn't hear what the damn ninja. I'm going to play My Ship, and then I'm going to call you up. I thought he said, I'm going to play My Shit, and then I'm going to call you up. But anyway, he played My Ship, and he must have talked for at least 10 minutes of how honored he was to have these wonderful musicians sit in with him. And it's the first time in his life anybody asked to play one of his tunes. And he totally went off on that. He always respect for me. He walked to me and said, let me see your mute. I saw him, he was another guy that kind of supported me, or was always had good things to say about me. But that was amazing. And these wonderful musicians, like he's going to play with Beethoven or somebody, and it's like, yeah. Of course you're going to play good after that. And that's why I regret when I went to the thing and Peter Loeb jumped up with, they were playing Mr. Peacey, and he jumped up on the stage with Coltrane, and everybody in the audience were laughing. He played his ass off. If you can't play,
on the stage with Coltrane.
If you can't play your ass off with Coltrane's band, you can't play. I always used to think, oh, I'm not ready for that. Well, those guys, anybody, they'll make you sound good. The first time I sat in with Elvin Jones, I know you hear Elvin Jones all crashing. You probably played with Elvin Jones a few times, right?
Yeah, I sat in with him.
You notice how clear it,
modal stuff.
Or it was, but I noticed how clear it was all around me. I was in the middle of some kind of crystal music globe or something. Or out front, it's like, hey, I mean, they put a record out as a gig I sat in with them. I'm not on it. It's live at Pookie's Pug with Joe Farrell, and they say it's Wilbert. I thought it was Wilbert Ware, but
no, it's Jimmy Garrison.
No, it's not Jimmy Garrison.
Maybe not on the record, but Jimmy did most of those gigs.
Well, at the time I went, it was Wilbur Ware was doing it, but who was the other Wilbur?
Wilbur Little.
Wilbur Little. I think they say it's him. Maybe he had different people.
But in 1968, that's when they had that gig, because I used to be at the Half Note, sitting in and hanging out almost every night during the week, because it was actually the year of the high school strike. The teachers went on strike.
Oh, yeah.
So I had a few months of not going to school, so I did remember that. And I would sit, I was too young to go into Pookie's Pub, but Roberta Garrison, I sat down one time next to her, and they were starting to throw me out. It was a trio with Joe Farrell and Jimmy, and Elvin. And Roberta either lied to them or said I was family or some kind of thing. But every night I'd come in and I'd sit with Roberta and talk a little bit with Jimmy. But, usually I would go back after their set. I'd run across the street and catch the set at the Half Note, because Pookie's and the Half Note were right across the street from each other at Spring and Hudson Streets. So every time I went to the Pookie's Pub, and I'm sure, and then Elvin had a fight with the manager of Pookie's Pub, and I remember that one night they weren't there anymore, that they said Elvin had torn the club apart.
Oh, really?
It had some argument over the money. So it's possible that, maybe before Jimmy was on that band, because Coltrane died.
It seems like
Coltrane
he had a piano
in 67 on July 13th, 1967. Is the day that John died.
Yeah.
And so 1968, this is like the springtime of 68, just about a year after that Train died. They were in there with and Jimmy was the bass player, because I know that. But it could have been, maybe he went back after Elvin probably, the life is so crazy, he might have destroyed the guy's club and smashed everything at the bar, and then been hired again the next month. I
can also remember, I think there was a piano player on that gig too, but it's a guy I haven't really heard of.
No, the gig I heard was all trio.
Yeah, well, that was Jimmy Garrison, right?
Jimmy Garrison and Joe And Elvin.
Yeah, well, I have those records, but no, this was I have that record. This was we had a piano player that was I thought it was Wilbert Ware, but they listed Wilbert Little on the David Weiss got it put out.
It might have been
And
Wilbur Little. I used to play in a trio with Wilbur Little with Duke Jordan. I was no drums. It was just Duke Jordan and Wilbur, and then they added me on a few gigs. We used to play these dating bars uptown.
yeah,
And you know, they in those days every place had a bad upright piano. But
yeah,
you know, but I guess as rents went up, they had to get rid of the pianos and make room for an extra table to pay the
mm.
exorbitant rent that was there. Now, you've also mentioned something about articulation, which I was wondering, I don't know if your horn is near you, but I remember we were talking about, you said there's too much legato articulation going on.
Yeah, I noticed myself doing that too. I went and listened to some stuff, and like perfect example, if you go on YouTube and Miles Davis playing Now's the Time, I think it is. Medium tempo. I mean, he tongues every note. Clifford Brown was tonguing notes all the time. A lot of people, Fats Navarro, Richard, what was his name?
Yes, Williams.
Yeah. I mean, they had this attack and everything, and it's like, I noticed I was doing this along with everybody else doing the legato and the smooth thing all the time too. And I also, I got a little tired of straight eighth notes. Remember they told us play straight eighth notes. Oh, go listen to Coltrane, man. I mean, Sonny Rollins. I mean, they're not always playing straight. They swing their balls off. You know what I'm saying? I got tired of that straight eighth note thing too. It's like, I like the bent notes and the sloppy notes and I mean, Mingus accused me of sounding like the exercise book. Can you imagine that? Me, when I first joined his band, And then, did he ever pull that one on you?
No, because no, he never told me too much wrong musically. I had Don Pullen took care of that.
Yeah. I wonder if Don grew out of that. Don and I became very close towards the end,
But Don was on me. Mingus was on me. My intonation, I had some intonation problems.
Oh yeah.
Time. And bass players are very sensitive to that anyway. And and I learned because of it, and then I told him once I didn't want to play on Better Get Hit in Your Soul. I said, because you got George Adams here. George is a one-man gospel choir. I said, I think I can play standard sometimes, better than he can with changes and stuff. But, but that kind of music, I said, Charles, I just didn't grow up in, I feel like I'm not honest when I play that.
Well, I was surprised. We went to a jam session after a gig one time in Champaign, Illinois, these guys' houses. That's where Jim McNeely and all the guys were from. And
where was it?
We played tunes, and George Adams just played. He didn't play any of that screaming stuff. He just played inside the tunes and stuff. I was surprised. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, he could do that. I knew George was a very rounded musician. He really was, and I guess he'd been a bassoon player too. That he was a really good classical bassoonist.
His time was impeccable. We were, sometimes Mingus would cut the band out, and let you have it on your own, But then he'd come in wrong a lot of time. And George, no matter what he'd be doing, he was, boom, always there when one was supposed to be, and Mingus and the rest of them weren't, One time Danny Richmond had to go back in the dressing room for something, and he handed me the drumstick, because I used to play little drums, and we were playing Duke Ellington, Sound of Love, and I tried to play drums with Mingus. I could not hit one note with this guy. They had their own sense of time. I could not hit. I swear to God, I could not. Forget it. There was no time, Mingus. There was no time. But when they played together, well, that just goes to show when you play 20 years together. You know what I'm saying? No matter what you. That's why I always wanted to have a band and stuff. The innovations and stuff most times would come out of bands. Coltrane came out of Miles Davis. you know.
And he got to have a band.
Sonny Rollins came out of Miles Davis, and you know, and
And
these
Clifford
guys.
and Max, also Clifford and Max
And look
was
at
an
all the guys,
important turning point for Sonny.
and look at all the guys that came out of Art Blakey, you know, and you know, and now they don't want a band. You know, my ex-wife was booking us and trying to book a tour in some festival in Austria or someplace. Who's in your band? So we list the people. Anthony Cox is on bass. Oh well, Anthony Cox played with another band here last year.
Ah, yes, I know that one.
That's when musicians, when they let that shit happen, that killed it. You know, now it's hard to when can you actually something that really grabs you and makes you like, this is some new stuff, you know, lately, you know. I mean, for I don't know, 40 years, you know, 50
Oh,
years.
well,
It's hard, you know. Imagine there's some people, but you're not going to hear them because you go to a jazz club and there's all these dead people photographs on the walls. You know what I'm
right.
saying?
And well, also, as far as getting a band of fresh cats, I mean, maybe now with all the young people out there, there are a lot of good young people out there again. And because of my condition, I don't tour anymore. I still play, by the way. Anybody
Yeah.
know about that? But um, you know, I uh, I think that yeah, so and so was here last year because you don't have a band that's steadily employed. You might employ a band for a tour, and then the next time you want to get the same cats, they're touring with somebody else.
I
They're,
know. I know.
you
Yeah,
know,
but I was trying to keep a band together. I did a couple of tours and I did kind of good for a minute, but now it's like, you know, like I said, I did just recording, and then there comes time for we had a gig right before that, and a couple of guys couldn't make it, you know, because of more money or something. And then, you know, the insult injury, it was a fucking Mingus big band, you know what I'm saying? Some monster I created. I wish I never would have done it because Mingus didn't like big bands. He even called Duke Ellington as an instrumentation as a Broadway pit band. You know, Mingus would have something different or a different approach, or he would have a cello or French horn or something in it, you know, that,
yeah, something to
you
make
know, yeah,
diversify it from the regular big band. What's the
yeah.
story you told me about ripping up the music and pasting it back
Oh
together?
yeah, yeah. Well, it's one of these times you know, we play this tune called For Harry Carney, and we play along. You play a couple of choruses, and then Johnny Richmond playing mallets, and Mingus would drop out, and so it was just the soloist and Danny Richmond playing. And after a while, the Mingus would come back in. Well, Don Pullen, every time he did it, uh, it like he would come back with the baddest Ramsey Lewis shit you ever heard in your life, you know, funky soul music, you know, wrong place. Mingus would never get it, you know, and so at one point they had a fight on stage, and we were in Canada at the El Mocambo. And they had a fight on stage. Said, "Well, Mingus is my solo. Well, you can be fired too, you know." And all this went through it. And then they played another tune. The next night we're in Gillies where was Gillies? In some place
Dayton,
in
Ohio.
okay,
I
and
played
we're playing in Gillies, and Don Pullen is sure enough. It comes to that part, and Don is strumming the piano and doing all this kind of stuff, and Mingus is the only, and then Don sits down all of a sudden, bam, and Mingus says, "Oh," and he took his own part and he ripped it up in little. I swear, a piece was no bigger than that. You know,
Mingus took his
confetti.
own part.
His own part, confetti, and just threw it up in the air. The next night, we go there, and he says, "Okay, we're going to start off again with for Harry Carney." And we're thinking, well, shit, what's he going to do? Because Mingus always had music paper in front of him. You know, I don't know why we had those tunes, but we did. You know, but but we said threw, he pulled out this thing. He had painfully put together like a 500-piece jigsaw puzzle. It's like every little piece of paper taped together of his part again, and he
So he
pulled it
must
out.
have knelt down all over the bandstand trying to put those pieces, pick them up first, and then put them together.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a new level of OCD.
Well, it's
Yeah.
funny. Another part of his show one time was like uh it was his amplifier. Did he have, was that part of his show where he'd kick his amplifier and scream at his amplifier when you were
No,
with him?
no, he didn't do that when I was around. But
And he was doing that one time, and we were in Vancouver, and he pulled the plug out of his amplifier, and the whole thing came apart. He just said, "Oh shit!" And one time I was drunk. I had it with they were, I sang the blues, and I was talking about, "I'm gonna get all you mofo," all his very dirty words and everything. And all he said afterward, he said, "Man, you cussed out my audience." I mean, he was funny sometimes too, in a good, he was basically a good person. I told you the story Britt Woodman told me what changed him, and I told you that story, right?
no,
Well, they
not
were childhood friends, and they said Mingus was always this polite, shy, little, sweet little guy and everything, and people would beat him out of his lunch money and steal his girlfriends and everything. And he said, "Mingus, let me take you in the backyard and I'll show you how to box a little bit, so you don't have to put up with that." And he said from that day on, he was the Mingus that we all know and love.
No, you hadn't told me that, but somebody must have taught him.
But the one that taught me, and the one that I remember a lot, was like, I mean, he stood up for me a couple of times. He wanted to go to Africa, and we had, I told you that story, I think.
Yeah, but we didn't tell it to the people, so we.
Oh, okay. Well, we were in the Music Inn in Rome. We played 4 days. We were going to have 4 days off and then play another 4 days. So in staying in the same room, these guys came from some African festival and said, "We'd like you, we can fly you down for 1 day. You can play a gig and come back and run to it." Man, I've always wanted to go to Africa all my life. Yeah, definitely. I'll do it. And then they said, "Okay, but leave the white boy in Rome." And he told him to kiss his ass. He kicked him out. Then that was one thing. He defended me on that thing a couple times. And the most soul searching thing he ever did was one time he gave me a hard time, and he saw I was all depressed and everything. He came up to me and he says, "Jack, I don't hate you, Jack. The only person I hate is myself."
Yeah.
So he was very, what you see is one thing I got to say about Mingus is he wasn't, I didn't see any guile. He wasn't sneaky about anything. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like Art.
Was what you got.
It wasn't like Art Blakey. I can't pay you this week because my 118th aunt died. And stuff like that. Eddie Henderson said, "Here's your pay. First week in a big bag of dope." and but Mingus, I never had any guile. I mean, what you saw is what you get. I learned how to deal with it. One time he was going to fire the whole band except for me. Was another time. One time he says, "Even Jack is out of tune," because I was always the guy who was in tune if everybody else was. But then but sometimes I learned how to deal with his rotten moods and everything. And sometimes I'd get a little bonus at the end of the week.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when he called me out of tune, the thing was, it was true. I had my horn getting fixed, the Selmer, and I had gotten a temporary horn that was a struggle to play in tune. And, of course he heard it. And so some nights he'd say, "I don't want to hear you this set." And he'd make me sit. There are other times he might do that and he just was doing it to be mean. But, generally he was okay. I mean, years later, the last time I actually saw him was at Bradley's one night. And he got to leave, got up to go with Sue. And I was listening to Jimmy Rainey was playing that night.
Yeah.
And I decided I'm going to tell him something. So I went out to the street and I said, "I just need to talk to you for 1 second, Charles. And I just want to say, I know we didn't end that well, but I just got to say that since I think, I've really gotten better. There's a lot of things that happened in my playing. I've grown, and you are really responsible as one of the things that really helped me grow. My experience
yeah.
Really, really did that. And so Mingus said to me, which is a funny thing, the point of this story is one can see something subjectively, and then when you hear the other side of it, you go, "Oh." He said, "Yeah, I've been hearing some good things about you. I've been hearing you don't got so much to prove no more."
Yeah.
And no wonder I was probably a pain in the neck, man. I mean, like I did have a lot to prove. I was
Yeah.
21 years old. And I was the only white guy on the band, and some part of me, at that point I was already 25, 26, and I would have had a different attitude toward it.
Yeah.
It would
Yeah.
have been different. So one
Well,
other thing,
I mean, even those guys like Don Pullen and them. I remember when our first tour I went with them. We went to we'd been off and we went to Italy, and Mingus there was people in there. Mingus got up and played the piano, started playing the Dick Fillings on 11 Down. Said, "Oh, we got to play this shit again." They changed their minds. They totally kept the band together. They afterwards. Where they got Cameron Brown and kept the George and Don and Danny.
and Danny, right? It was essentially Mingus without Mingus.
Yeah. Well, we kept that band together for a while. And but I mean, it's up and down. It's like I can, I don't trust people that are nice all the time.
Yeah, that's
Or they're so interested in what you're saying that they I don't trust those people, man.
that's interesting.
That happened a couple of times to me with the trombone player. Like I went to my record date. Come time the record date, no record date. And then another time I joined his band and we played for a year and a half or something, touring all over the place. And by the time it came for the record date, he got a whole different band, and it's like, but he was one of these guys who's always so interested all the time. And you know what I mean? But also I would see in the other bands, and if he wasn't getting over with the audience, he would start dancing during other people's solos.
The same trombone player.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing.
But anyway, it's getting the point. I got to run anyway.
Yeah, well, we got to do that. But yeah, so I was just wondering though did you get next to Don Cherry at all?
No, I didn't know Don. He came to one time. He came to Bologna when I was with Ray Charles, and he hung out with James Clare. James Clare had to be led on the bus the next night. He was blind the next day. He was so hungover, and he said he was looking for me to hang out with him and Don Cherry, but he couldn't find me. He didn't know where I was. We're on the road. But I would have liked that. I always liked Don Cherry. Plus I have a video where Don Cherry plays Skippy.
Yeah,
on the piano, and anybody who can play Skippy on any instrument is a hero in my book. You know what I'm saying? That's got to be the hardest tune ever.
I would say it's definitely.
Donna Lee's up there. I mean, if you don't do it for a while, I got to go back to it again. You know what I mean?
Sean Up is the one I have.
Oh yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
That one gives me more trouble than those.
Yeah.
But anyway, Jack, it's been a real pleasure.
Okay.
And
you want to see some hard tunes? Get the Eddie Harris Abershold book. There's some hard shit in there. You know what I mean? I was playing out of his intervals book. You ever seen that?
Yeah.
I was practicing out of that for a while. So
he told me when I ran into him in Switzerland one night many years ago, and he told me that he was one of the first people to actually play the synthesizer, and in the studios.
Yeah.
And he said he was making much more bread and was much more active living in L.A. playing synthesizer in the studios. And he was happy to be in Europe finally playing some jazz. He said he hadn't done that for a while. And
well, when I went to Berkeley in the mid '60s and everything, there was 4 saxophone players. There was Coltrane, there was Sonny Rollins, Roland Kirk, and Eddie Harris. I heard Eddie Harris with a trio once at the jazz workshop, just bass and drums. And I thought, Jesus, that's one I never forgot. That was some other stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I know. The thing about Eddie Harris with me is like, I find there's different kinds of players, but there's two kinds of influences you can have sometimes. There are cats that play a certain way, and you say, I could think of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like when I hear Joe Henderson or Rollins, or even Train to some extent, I'm going, yeah, I might have come up with this stuff even if I hadn't heard these people as intimately as I have, which is flattering myself. But on the other hand, somebody like Eddie Harris, when I really heard him stretch out, I had the thought, I could never conceive that stuff.
Yeah.
I know
there's some other, well, but also, just because I got to leave, I'll leave you with this little story. The bass player I was talking about from Montana, that he ended up playing with Eddie Harris for a while, said to Eddie Harris when he played Freedom Jazz Dance, he'd say, now I'm going to play the tune that Miles Davis couldn't play. It's true. Did you ever hear the studio?
He's cacking notes all over the place. He's
I can't play that shit. And then only on Sundays, first they tried a feeling that was impossible, but then it was funny, it's like, I can't play that shit. And then he did it. He said, okay, I'm ready. He did it one time, and then he did screwed it up again. Says, only on Sunday.
all right on Sunday.
All right.
One last thing. I was just thinking, you did play Miles' last gig.
One of them, the Montreux gig.
One of his last gigs at Montreux. Could you just give me that story for a minute? You had an interesting.
Well, it was. I felt creeped out by it because I can see they were trying to make I think like Mingus, all these people started hanging out with Mingus. They were trying to get one last buck out of this guy that was clearly on the way out. I mean, his arms, he looked like a 12-year-old child, I mean, his body and everything. And he was, it was Wallace Roney Day because Wallace had been playing with George Gruntz's band. And Wallace wouldn't play parts after a while because he felt he wasn't getting enough solo space, but nobody was, I mean, George even had a metronome that he would start to count off the tunes with, he was like, this Swiss German thing. Yeah. And like
that's one way to put it.
And Wallace, was on the tour and he got an attitude. I'm going to quit after playing with Miles and everything. But then he stayed on after that because what happened was we get to the rehearsals at 11 in the morning and Miles gets there at 11 at night. And he was clueless. But they figured that might happen. So they'd hired Benny Bailey to cover for Miles Davis until Miles Davis got there. But George Gruntz didn't know that. He said, well, Miles knows, or Wallace knows the music. My God, he knows every note that Miles Davis ever played. I swear to God, the boy needed an exorcist, man. He was like, he stood like Miles Davis, played the same horn, had the same birthday, did everything, the same personality, quiet personality. And I mean, he needed an exorcist,
he got mad at me. By the way, I don't want to interrupt. But
who Wallace is?
Wallace got mad at me because I said one thing to him. We were talking, and Wallace was a student of mine when he was at Berkeley. I mean, and we also were in Art Matthews' band together with Alan Dawson and stuff. But anyway, so Wallace is saying, and Wallace got very heavy in life. He ate a lot, and he
his son looks and plays just like him. He looks and plays just like him now.
I know, I've heard about that. I haven't heard him, but Wallace got large, and so he's saying to me, Miles and I, we're so much alike. We're so much alike. I said, except for one thing, Wallace. What's that? I said, your weight. Miles had far too much vanity to allow himself to get into the shape that you're in.
Yeah.
And I feel bad because Wallace died young, and partly that may have contributed to his demise because he did get so big. But Wallace he wouldn't talk to me for about a year after that. He'd say, I had to apologize. I said, Wallace, I didn't mean to offend you with that, but I was just speaking the truth.
Wallace, he had an attitude. He'd pout and wouldn't play. I seen him do that on a couple of gigs. But anyway, it was. But he was also shy. One time, I was at the Vanguard. Most of these weirdos were sitting in with McCoy Tyner said, don't wait to be asked, man. Just go up there and play, But anyway, so we get to this festival, and Wallace plays the whole rehearsal. I mean, he even played the breaks. the same shit that Miles Davis played on the record on the breaks, the solo breaks and stuff, and like so we get to so they decided he's going to play the uh 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 he's gonna play Wallace going to play the gig with them because Miles didn't have the chops, and therefore the three of them, Kenny, Garrett, and Wallace and Miles, and I had to look up sometimes to see who was playing, but Miles was more in the chord changes, and Wallace was more that chromatic later on thing, and like but Miles would play some fart in his horn or play something, and Miles just like he's a little girl getting ready to go on his knees. You know what I mean? And I said, my God, man, it's a grown man, But then after that, like he felt great again because he was playing the gig, and the Bulgarian women's choir
Oh, they're
asked,
wonderful.
asked him to sit in with him, and they did Summertime.
With Wallace.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
was Wallace Roney Day at Montreux. That was when he got over,
Maybe even played that. But Wallace, just one other thing about that. It's like Oscar Levant said that he knew Doris Day before she was a virgin. And I knew Wallace when he didn't play like Miles.
Well, I've had a record. I have a record of him. I think this guitar player played with Dizzy. That Wallace was on his record. He didn't sound anything like that,
Yeah, it was
So-
Al. Right, Al. I forget his name now, but yeah, he was playing like there was a lot of Clifford and some Kenny Dorham in his playing when I met him. That's how he was playing then.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's been
So-
great. And
Yeah, I got to run and before the place closes. But
Go
if you
do
want
that.
anytime you want to hash about this, I'm fine with it. No publicity is bad publicity, huh?
Dude, I don't know, probably.
It's like
Thanks.
one thing we were talking about critics, and one guy from was a critic says, like Jazz Times and stuff. Nobody criticizes anymore. Everything is just wonderful. There's no critiques of anything. It's put something, and Jazz Times, everything was, this is a record you must have in your collection. And one of my records, my second Blue Note record, they didn't pan it totally, but they didn't like it so much. So I felt great. I got a bad review, and but it didn't bother me because a guy that wrote this book called Discovering Great Jazz wrote 3 pages about it. So that's cool too.
Yeah, well, that's what makes horse races, but I mean, they usually it depends on if your record company's advertising.
Yeah. Well,
Magazine,
also like
They
Moohall
usually don't
Richard.
give you too bad a review.
Moohall Richard Abrams said the best thing ever. A bad review is bad. A good review is worse. Look at Anthony Braxton. Remember this guy? He couldn't do anything wrong, and then he couldn't blow his nose. They always build people up and then they tear them down again.
Which is just to leave you with this. When I first met Sonny Rollins, he had just come back. This was 1960. I'm sorry, 1972, and he had just come back from another hiatus. And the people were going crazy at the Vanguard. They were loving it and this and that. So I just met him. I was just turned 20, and I said, Sonny, it must be amazing to feel all this adulation and all this love from these people when you're, with your playing, which of course, you deserve. But wow, you must feel amazed. He says, well, I always try to find the middle ground. He said, people are very fickle. He said, audiences are very fickle. So when they really like you, don't get too ecstatic. And when they really soon, they'll dislike you, and you don't want to get too depressed. You got to find the middle ground.
Yeah.
And that was some of the best advice he ever gave me.
Okay, but I got to run now.
Right, bye-bye.
Okay, call me. Let's do it
Thank
again
you, everybody.
sometime.
Mr. Jack Walrath.
Okay.
To have him here with us.
See you later.
See you later on the real side with Jack Walrath. I want to thank Jessy Kaiser for helping us put this all together. I want to thank you who's watching to have watched. If you did watch and you enjoyed this, then you can give us a like. And you can follow us at bobmoverjazzability.com. And we're glad once again that you joined us today. And I say, have a good week, everybody. Hope to see you next Thursday. And God bless you all. Thank you.